What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Case Digital. My name is Zach. In today's video, we're answering the question of how to do math in Python, right? Because essentially you've done your math problem, but you want to check it. So how do you put in all the variables or values and check your work, right? So let's start talking about what you can do and how you can do math in Python. So doing math in Python is actually pretty easy and pretty helpful. I actually use it a lot to even check my own stuff when I'm doing either my own projects or my own calculations on stuff. I use Python a lot to help me do so. But before we kind of get into the different things such as addition, subtraction, multiplication, exponents, and all that stuff, I wanted to talk about to give us a basis understanding of the differentiating in Python and how you can differentiate between positive and negative numbers. And the biggest difference is if you do a minus sign in front of a number, that'll obviously, just like in the math world, it's the same in Python. This will make this the negative value, right? And then if you want a positive value, obviously there's no negative sign in front of it, just like in math, right? So a lot of the stuff that you've learned in, say, your math classes and all growing up about positive, negative, and addition and subtraction, all that's going to apply in Python. It's just like, how do you get it in the code forming to do so? So let's start talking about the different operators or operations that you can do with math in Python. All right, just like in schooling, we're going to start from the easiest stuff and kind of get up into the more complicated stuff. But essentially, let's start off talking about addition in Python. How would you do addition in Python? Well, essentially, it's the same as you would do addition like in your schoolwork on paper. So let's do something like this. Let's print it out. So print, and then we have our f string, and I'm going to say a value plus b value is going to equal another value, right? And so in here, we're going to do something like a plus b. And I can pull this out if we want to help make this a little bit better, more understanding, so you can see exactly the math part. We can say d is going to equal to a plus b. Oops, b. And then we'll replace this with our letter of d. Okay, oops. And that probably imported something yet. All right, so just like that, we have, just like you would see in your math class when growing up, a plus b equals a value. And like in math, it's just like Python. Python's going to read it the same way as you do, is left to right. So it's going to say something like 5 plus negative 5, and then it should give us a 0 value. Now, granted, the only difference between probably what you do on paper versus what you do in is the assignment stuff, because oftentimes you'd put the assignment over here, but the assignment in Python, everything has to be on this on the right hand side, to basically indicating that we're going to take the value of this and put it into, or assign it to, this value. So that might be the only difference, but really this is the same as you would do it in your elementary school. So if I run this and say Python you get something like 5 plus negative 5 is going to be equal to 0. I could also do this with floats. How does that apply to float values? I can say 5 or a plus c, change that, and then we're going to get, basically this is going to say 5 plus 2.5 is going to be equal to d, which, just like in elementary school, should be 7.5. So that's how you do addition in Python. All right, so let's talk about how you can do subtraction in Python. So again, it's going to be the same like you do in elementary school, where I can say a minus c. So that's our addition part, right? And we'll copy this kind of same setup here, and we'll then say right here. So we'll say a minus c is equal to d. So we know that a is 5 minus 2.5 is going to be our 2.5, right? So again, this is the same if we had a negative number here, right? So a and b. So a minus b, and it's going to be the same as it would, I'm probably going to just be a broken, record here. But essentially, a minus b, if b is a negative number, it's going to say basically a minus negative. So a minus negative 5, which will turn that into a positive, like it does in our normal math. So if we run this, we should see that 5 minus negative 5 is going to be equal to 10, right? Which is just like it would show in normal math, because the two negatives cancel to a positive when you're doing that. But if we reversed it, b minus a, and we said b minus a, and we run this again, you're going to get the negative 10, right? So a negative, basically, so if it goes 5 minus and the negative number, it's going to switch it to basically basically say 5 plus that number. And then if it's negative 5 or a negative number minus a positive number, it's going to then be a more negative number, right? And I could also show, if I do this, minus b right here, b minus b is equal to d. If we rerun that, we get negative 5 minus 5 is going to be 0, because like I just said, through those rules of math, you get those change it into a positive, which make it negative 5 plus 5, which is obviously 0. So that is essentially how you can do basic subtraction in Python. So how do you do multiplication in Python? Well, we've done our addition and subtraction, so we're basically going to copy the same setup here, go down, and we're going to do our multiplication. Now, in multiplication, sometimes you'll see, like when you're writing on your piece of paper, you did in your math class, you had something like a little star or a dot or whatnot to then multiply values together. And basically the character syntax in Python for the multiplication value is going to be, we're going to A star B, and then we can say, oops, star right there. And then this will be A star B is equal to D. Oh, there we go. Auto completing some stuff. There we go. So if we run this, we don't need that because that auto built in. If we run this, what we're essentially going to see is A times B is going to equal to 5 times negative 5, which is going to be equal to our negative 5. So again, those negative rules apply. A negative times a positive is going to be a negative. And if I change this to a B and I rerun this, to a B, so B times B. So negative times a negative is going to be equal to positive. So those rules, those same math rules are still applying. This is just the syntax I want to show you. So, I mean, and I haven't tried this. So I'm going to actually try this with you. So B times B is going to be an error because you're basically trying to evaluate this is an error because essentially what's happening is this is an integer value. And then when you do this, the parentheses, what's happening is either saying you're trying to access it or you're trying to call essentially a function. And there's no such function that we have that's called B. So doing this is invalid syntax for multiplication in Python. You can, however, do something like B times 1, say plus 2, or 1 plus 3. So that'll be 4 total times, we said B was what? Negative 5. So this should be 4, then times 5 should be negative 20, if I did my math right. And actually, let's print this out. So print f string of B times 1 plus 3 is equal to B. I may have, there we go. All right, so if we run that, you see that negative 5 times 1 plus 3 is going to be negative 20 because order of operations is happening here, right? So we have this is taking place first because it's in parentheses, and then we're then multiplying the negative 5, so we get the negative 20. So as you can see, that's multiplication. Order of operations does apply. However, you cannot do something like this, which you can do in your basic math class, because what it is assuming is that you're either trying to index or do something with the integer value, or that there's a function called b that you can pass an argument into, and we just know that's not the case, so you'd get an error. So to do your math, every time you have it in front of parentheses or you want to do something like that, you have to put the actual the symbol of the star in it to get it to show you that it's doing math correctly. So we run that again, same input. So that is basically how you do or can do multiplication in Python. All right, so how do we do division in Python? Well, I'm basically going to take the same thing, but I want to show you something. There's two things here that I want to show with division, and it involves like a float and stuff like that. But essentially, if I say, let's make an e value, and I want to say this is equal to 2, just straight integer 2. If I go ahead and I say a divided by e, what this will do is we can get rid of this one. The backslash is the syntax for the division in Python. However, there is something that we should note. So let me just show this first before we talk about my caveat here. If we run this, I want to say, we run this, what you'll see here is our division. 5 divided by 2 is 2.5, right? So if you take two integers and you divide them by, so if they don't go into each other completely, like 2 does not go into 5 completely, then you'll see that it will create a float value for you, right? It'll give you that 2.5 result, which is what you would expect in this case, right? However, there is, and the same order of operations does apply, like normal, like in any mathematical world and stuff that you've learned growing up. Order operations, if you do like the parentheses like we did up here, you can't do a value. There's no way to like write essentially something like this. Let's do this. I guess if I took this and did 1 plus 3, this is essentially saying like a over the value of 1 plus 3, like you would see kind of in your math. So if you want to do something like a over b for like a fraction, subtraction or stuff like that, you'd have to do something like that divided by a, the value, or like you're going to do like 1 plus 3 over like this sequence of stuff over, or all divided by a value or a, you have to do it, kind of give it this syntax and whatnot. So if I ran this, you'll see that we'll get something like 1 plus 3 divided by a is going to be equal to d. And if we run that, that's going to be 4 divided by 5, which is 0.8. But there is one thing that I should note. It's called the floor division in math. So in Python, you can also do 2 double backslashes. And if you run this, what ends up happening is it takes the floor of whatever value you get. So we know that when we did 4 divided by 5, just previously it gave us 0.8 or 0.8, which is important to know. But then when we do the floor division, the floor in math is it takes whatever value and then goes to the closest whole number below it. So if I have 0.8, the floor is going to be 0, right? The seal of it, or the ceiling of 0.8, is going to be 1. But in Python, you can do basically floor division if you always need and this is probably a trick that people use if they always want an integer value and they don't care about rounding up or not. They just basically do the floor division of something, which will give it, that value. So I could also do, going back to what we had before, a divided by 4 is essentially what that is. I can then go something like this, or I'll do e. I'll do what we had. A floor division of e is going to be 5 divided by 2, and before we knew like 5 divided by 2 is 2.5, but in this case, when you do it, it's just going to be 2 because like it's going to go to the floor. Even though it was at a 0.5 value, it's going to go to the floor. So that's basics with the division. It is, again, read everything left to right, just like in your normal multiplication operation. Orders still apply, especially when you chain all these together, right? Like, addition and multiplication will hold equal weight. They'll just do the left to right first, and then things like addition and multiplication take precedent over addition and subtraction. Parentheses take more precedent over, all those and whatnot. All those operation of order still apply. So that is basically how you do division right there in Python. So how do you do exponentiation in Python, or how do you take a number and raise it to a certain power in Python? Well, oftentimes you'll see the caret operator, right? So if I say something, or you'll see the caret, so like people do like, in math, I see the caret sometimes. It's like 2 caret 2 is like 2 to the 4th, or the 2 to the 2 over 2. How do you do that in code in Python? So let's show that. So if I do d is equal to, and I'll just say 2 to the 2, right? So the actual syntax in Python is not the caret. You might think it might be, but it's not, right? It's going to be a double star and then 2, and then whatever value you want to do, right? So I can say something like, take this off. So 2 raised to the, or let's go e raised to the 2. Oops, e raised to the 2 is d. So if I run that, I get 2 raised to 2 is 4. So just like that. And I can also chain this to say something like 2 plus a. I can use variables if I want. And I can say 2 plus a right in there. And you'll say 2 raised to the 7th is 128. So to do exponentiation in Python is basically using the syntax of the double star to show that you're going to raise whatever values at the front to the power of whatever value you're putting in there. And again, you could create a whole different, so let's do something like, you could create a whole different thing of like b plus a, and again you have to do something like times, right, divided by 5, and I can take this whole value here and I can evaluate it within here, and I can run this, and it says that 2, that value actually came out to 2.5. I just was throwing stuff together, is going to equal to, and then a 4.0. So we put in an integer value. That's one thing to note too. This wasn't int value because it was just 2, not 2.0 or 2.1 or 2.5. It was just 2. We did our math. This came out to equaled out to a float, and then which produced the value of a float value. So you got 2 or 4.0. So just know there, that's how you can do exponentiation in Python. So how do you do modulus division in Python, or the modular of a value, basically getting the remainder? In Python, it's actually pretty nice because the syntax is something like, we can say, let's do, or if we go back up to the top, we have 5, -5, 2.5. Let's do a modulus 2. So a, the modulus sign is a parentheses, and then e. So we can say in our code here, this will be be E, and this will be A, and this will be that. Now, again, this is going to give us the remainder value. If we run this code, essentially 5 modulus 2 is 1, right? And that's because that 5 divided by 2 is 4 with the remainder, or excuse me, is 2 with the remainder of 1, or 2, because 5 divided by 2 is 2.1, right? But if you do like the long division way in math, when you're doing your math, you end up with like a remainder value of 1. And so the modulus operator basically is doing that. This sign is saying, given this value, what is, and here's the other value, like what is what is the remainder of her, what is the remainder left when this value goes into this value and whatnot. And so that is how you get the modulus operator and do the modulus operator in Python. All right, so these are the basic ways that you can do Python with addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, whether it be division or floor division, exponentiation, and you doing modulus operators, right? Now, again, like I mentioned, a lot of this, the same rules apply, with addition and subtraction, all the things that you've learned from elementary school up until college and whatnot, all those things still apply. Order of operations and whatnot. It's just the way of writing it. And probably the key takeaways that you need to know is that, again, a minus in front of a number equates to the negative number, just like it would in normal math. When you want to do, say, a value, parentheses, meaning times the inside of whatever, the operation inside of parentheses, you actually have to designate the value that you're trying to do that, because otherwise Python thinks syntactically that you're trying to treat that as either like trying to index into that value, or there is like a function called, like if you're using a variable b rather than a number, like it thinks that there's a number here if you do something like this. And so that's why it's important that you always have to identify what you're doing. As far as your order operations, like times or plus or minus or modulus or whatever, you have to designate that when you have parentheses when there's a value in front of the parentheses. But essentially, and this is just the basics. I wanted to talk about the basics of how you basically do math in Python. You can do all of this again in the Python interpreter. Like if I pull up this, it doesn't have to be in a script. This is just how you do it in script. But this is what I do essentially when I have to check stuff, is I'll come in here and I'll be like 5 plus 5, right? Gives me 10. And I can say something like 5 plus 10 times 50 divided by 40 plus 20. I don't know. The order of operations still apply. Like it should evaluate this value here, which we'll just make this so it comes out to something. So I'll use a negative value. Oops, just lost it. So if I do 5 plus, and I do negative 10 plus 50 divided by 40 plus 2, you'll see that the value comes out to 8. The reason being is you're doing order of operations, right? It's going to do that's going to be 40, and then it's going to evaluate this first because it's in parentheses, and then it's going to be, plus or division and multiplication have a higher precedent than a subtraction and addition. So then it's going to be 40 divided by 40, which is 1, and then from there on you're going to do left to right because the rest of the operators are pluses. It'll be 5 plus 1, which is 6, plus 2, which is 8, and that's why you get the value of 8 for this things. Now, I'll probably create additional videos where you're doing things such as summations or product values, a little bit more complicated math, because you can do all that same type of stuff here with Python. But for now, this is the basics of how you can do math in Python. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I hope you found this helpful. If you did, please hit the like and subscribe button. And until next time, keep on programming.